Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 183. I'm your host, John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email about blockchain gaming. You can find that at gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm talking to Jihoz Zirlin, better known as Jiho, who is one of the co-founders at Sky Mavis. Always great to talk to Jeff, third time on the show. And in today's show, we are really talking about the development of the Ronin blockchain, so the blockchain that Sky Mavis came up with for Axie Infinity back in the day. And that is really moving from a sort of blockchain in which Sky Mavis runs its own games. It still does that, but now it's becoming much more a ecosystem. So over 20 games are now announced for Ronin. A whole bunch of them are actually live. It's a permission blockchain, so you need Sky Mavis's permission to do that. But over time, they are going to be opening that up. And I think what's interesting is while there are obviously hundreds of blockchain games out there, we are starting to see, at least on Ronin, games being launched, often in sort of closed beta or sort of a time-limited alphas. But they are finding an audience because we know people on Ronin have wallets and they have tokens and they want to play games. So it's still early days. We don't know really if any other game on Ronin is going to get to the heights of Pixels, which has been the biggest blockchain game for 2024. But there are a whole bunch of quite interesting games coming out there. Particularly, we talk about a bit about RPGs and MMORPGs, and really how Sky Mavis is sort of dealing with moving from a game developer who makes games, still does, but now much more a sort of platform holder, and how it is sort of picking the games that it gets on Ronin and where that goes in the future. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Remember, every week we're putting out new episodes of the podcast with people who are making blockchain games and building out this new future. So don't miss out. Do subscribe. But on with the show. Hello, everyone. Very pleased to welcome back to the show Jeff from Sky Mavis. Third time on, Jeff. How's it going?
Yeah, going well. Yeah, it's always fun to be here and do one of these.
It's been actually. It's been a year and a half since you were last on. I remember last time I was on holiday and it was had a very dodgy connection. So hopefully this one this one will be better on the technical front. It's hard to know where to begin really for a year and a half of blockchain gaming and Sky Mavis and Ronin and all the other things. So let's start off with I guess the last bit of news you had, which I guess is sort of interesting, but slightly lateral from the other stuff you've been doing. So Axie Pals is, I guess, a little play into the sort of, I don't know, generative AI sort of thing. I think that sort of thing's coming, but an idea of, I guess, taking the Axie characters, much loved, out of the game or extending them out of the game. So this is a Chrome extension, and you can choose an Axie and have it with you, and it's like at the moment a little sort of Tamagotchi sort of nurturing sort of game with AI stuff to follow. Can you talk a little bit about the thinking around that? Because that was, a bit of a surprise that you would sort of go in that direction.
Well, yeah. I mean, so since the beginning of Axie, people have loved their Axies, even before there was a game. And the original Axie game was people looking at their Axies, talking about them, imagining what they could be in the future. And from the beginning, right, we always said, hey, like, you can think of Axies as similar to Pokemon or Tamagotchi. Well, when it comes to the battle side of things, I think that's been quite well explored, right? We've done multiple iterations of the battle system over the years, and some, obviously Classic was something that got Axie and even Web3 gaming as a whole, right, to the next stage of traction and awareness. But something that we've always had in the back of our minds was, hey, Axie would be really interesting and a type of sort of nurturing experience, right? An experience that leans into their natural proclivity or appeal to pet owners. Yeah. So that's what this product is about, right? It's like this is a minimum viable product to see, hey, what would an Axie Tamagotchi interpretation look like? But of course, this is the modern day, and it's very hard to, and might not be even needed, right, to try to create like some sort of physical thing that we ship out to people. Obviously, also very hard to do the blockchain integration. So we met this team called MetaPals. Now I believe they're called Kindred. And they had a very interesting product, which basically allows you to have your NFTs on your browser at all times via a Chrome extension. Obviously, Chrome extension is quite familiar to the Web3 audience. And yeah, you can feed your Axies, you can pet them, you can throw them around your screen. So I kind of see them as, right, also in some ways like a digital fidget spinner Right
Yeah.
now, as we speak, my Axie is on my screen. I can, while I talk to you, throw it around the screen. I can pet it, and not, all the while I'm gaining experience points, right? Which are, stored on chain and can be used to progress my Axie, make it more beautiful, make it more powerful in the different Axie games. So yeah, the response has been quite positive so far. I think the D7 retention rate is like around 18%.
Okay.
And the D1 was around 50%, and the qualitative feedback has been quite good. And it's I think something to get us dreaming and experimenting on the Axie side once again, right? Axie's been stabilized. We've
Yeah.
made some interesting progress when it comes to making them dynamic NFTs, and SLP is now deflationary. Axie treasury is generating around $300,000 per month, which puts it up there. If at prop, in my calculation, the number one NFT project in terms of recurring, sustainable revenue on a month-by-month basis. But yeah, it felt like, hey, let's experiment with something new. So that's the thinking behind Axie Pals, and what could it become in the future? Yeah, perhaps some sort of LLM integration where you can speak to your Axies. What if we downloaded all of our support articles and put it into the LLM, and then rather than speaking to Sky Mavis support staff, or you could ask your Axie, hey, how do I do this with the Ronin wallet, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing is like, could it be like a Web3 Twilio, right? So rather than us sending text messages, which are quite intrusive, what if your Axie was like, hey, right, we just released this thing. Hey, check your email, right? Check Discord. One of the pain points that we get from our players is like, guys, you're doing too much. It's too hard to keep up to date with everything that you're shipping. And we're like, okay, maybe there are other ways of, right, basically sending out notifications that, hey, something is new, something has come, there's something to check. So those are just some of my rough thoughts on Axie Pals.
It's obviously, it's sort of like a fairly sort of experimental product at the moment, and fairly sort of light-hearted. Having stuff like sort of genAI, obviously, so I guess everyone's trying stuff out in that. But you can sort of see as you're talking there, you can sort of see in your head how something like that might sort of develop into something a little less sort of maybe frivolous is the wrong word, but it could develop into slightly more of a sort of a product that's actually doing something different. I guess we're going to get a lot of these sort of AI agents sort of thrown at us from various sort of places, and games where people spend a lot of their time is an obvious sort of like point to to have those agents sort of be. So you can sort of imagine it sort of
I think
spinning out into something a bit bigger.
It's also like a take on the Telegram Tapper clicker.
Okay, yeah.
In some ways, where we're like, hey, well, that's cool, but maybe Axie we're always want to be thinking differently, right? Rather, what if instead of I think the theme with Telegram is like accessibility, right? It's kind of like web app store. It's very easy to just open up your Telegram app, which you're doing anyways. Well, people are opening up their browsers anyway, right? They're using Chrome extensions anyways, right? They're doing work. So this is a little bit more of a product for the Axie professional class in some ways, right? People who have jobs cannot afford to spend time playing with their Axies constantly and battling, right? People, for me, right, it's like I love my Axies. I cannot play with them every day, but now I have some way of maintaining that connection, seeing my favorite Axies, playing with them, progressing them a bit. So.
Cool, good. Okay, so that went out the way. Let's talk a bit more about sort of Axie. You've obviously, mentioned that the battle games are there. You've got the classic and the Origins, and Origin has been growing pretty well actually through 2024. Obviously, people are interacting with that now. That there's you have quite a solid sort of token sort of meta on that, sort of giving away the token. So I guess that's driving sort of quite a lot of it as well. There's just loads of other stuff you've tried over the years or still building out. Actually, Homeland I guess is the biggest one of those, but other products as well. How do you see that whole, I guess we can call it an ecosystem, which is still for many people is seen as the battle game, and I guess for a lot, because that had such an impact, that will very much, I suppose, always be there. But I guess from with the Sky Mavis hat on, you always want to be going forward, and obviously, I guess Homeland is a very different sort of product, more like a resource strategy sort of product. How do you see that sort of continuing?
Well, so what do we know about Axie? We know that Axie is one of very few mature Web3 gaming IPs that are on the market. Right? It's the Web3 gaming IP that's been in longest continuous development, and we've continued to ship things for Axie for 6 years.
Yeah.
And when it comes to what is Axie's role in the broader Ronin ecosystem, right? The way that I see Axie, right, for us is similar to Mario for Nintendo, right? Where it's that iconic flagship IP, and over time it will become just one of many prominent IPs on the Ronin network. But it'll be, when people think of Ronin, right, one of the first thing that they're going to think of when it comes from an IP's perspective, it'll be Axie, and that I believe will be the case for a long time, if not forever. And one of the things that we can do with Axie is, since it's a mature IP, we can test out, right? Like, okay, where do we see the next innovation coming from, right? I think we experimented a lot and defined the playbook when it came to emission of tokens and incentives to attract users. The next thing, then, the thing that the space needs to figure out is, okay, how do you make it so that the people who are earning the tokens, that there's some demand that's less speculative and more some reason to actually hold rather than just farm and sell the tokens, right? And so that's why Axie has been at the forefront of experiments like dynamic NFTs, where you can basically spend Axis tokens to upgrade your Axies, and that's become a significant source of AXS syncage, right, or balancing. So yeah, and then a lot of those things that we discover with Axie, they'll have applications across our publishing stack, where, hey, this is something that worked for Axie, we see that you're going through this issue, right? So all these learnings that we get from Axie end up being quite useful for our publishing arm, right? Where, we feel like, of course, we need to be advising from a position where we've actually tried and dog-fooded a lot of the approaches that we're recommending, right?
Yeah. Which brings me sort of nicely onto the sort of where I was going to go anyway. I guess what we've seen really from sort of November last year when Pixels went live is Ronin becoming a blockchain that doesn't just have Sky Mavis stuff on it, and in fact we've probably got to the point now, where have you got I think 20 announced titles, where to some degree you sort of look at it and sort of Axie Infinity as a sort of product is one of the smaller games on Ronin, because you have obviously Pixels is whatever it's, I know, peaked at 1 million, now down to about 600,000 I think daily still, and you have all these other things sort of launching. So just from a Sky Mavis point of view, how easy has the transition been from being a developer of games and you're running your own blockchain to now suddenly you've got hundreds of games, but you've got suddenly quite a lot of sort of stakeholders, and I guess that always causes some sort of tension in terms of times and resources and who are you going to put here and all this sort of stuff.
So, all right, what is the principle behind our approach, right? So our idea is that, okay, we go from mastering to an extent one game and learning what worked for that, creating the technical solutions, to then opening that up to different teams. But rather than spraying and praying at the beginning and giving out hundreds of different grants and just a cursory amount of minor support to each team, we believe that we have the expertise and the eye, maybe the taste necessary to pick winners, right? To figure out, hey, like, this team has potential, we can see ourselves in them, right? Or this is something that our user base and our community would love. So our approach, right, and especially in the beginning, has been to pick winners, to back teams that we believe in, that we believe have a reasonable chance of success, and to spend more resources, time, and effort, kind of incubating them and giving them a very warm introduction to our community. So showing them the work, the ropes, teaching them, what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, and also what are the things that we don't really know, because that's also important to share. So our approach has been to specialize and focus on a narrower set of teams, and some success cases like Pixels, I think, have reasonably validated that approach. Now, okay, but we cannot stay stagnant. So now in the early days, we believe that we need to provide more of a kind of a white glove, very focused approach, because we're not sure what will work. But as we start to figure out what works, we then have to start to scale and also almost disrupt ourselves in a way. Where if the early approach of Ronin is more similar like to an Apple like approach, where it's like more focused, more vertically integrated, and that type of approach in the long run, while it's useful at the beginning of consumer adoption cycles, starts to run into limitations, right? That's why you start to see Google, Microsoft overtake Apple in market cap recently, right? So it's kind of a dance that you need to play, where in the beginning, a more focused approach is better, but in the long run, a more open approach is better. So what are we doing? We're doing more focused and vertically integrated in the beginning, but then we have to open up and disrupt ourselves, right? So that's related to things like Ronin Forge, where we just onboarded a cohort of teams that we'll be a little bit like more lighter touch with. We believe that they're more independent, that they can, that they it can be a little bit more, basically self-serving or self-service, I should say. And then, that's also related to ZKVM, which is related to this kind of initiative to open up the Ronin network in general. So we're going like with this phased approach, where our more selective, focused approach, that cannot be our bread and butter forever. But we think it was the right approach to begin with. I think that's broadly been validated. But yeah, now it's about, okay, how can we start to scale up and make it so that anyone, could theoretically launch on the Ronin network. And this is also from we cannot have long-term too much of a bias, where some of the best, the next pixels, might come from a team that doesn't necessarily even have the attributes that we're looking for, right? Eventually, we may lose a little bit of the touch around and the insight around what's the next meta, right? Because we'll be a little bit more experienced, right? And the sacrifice that you make when you're a little bit more experienced is maybe you're a little bit too opinionated or biased when it comes to what you think will work.
Which is that leads me on to a question I wasn't sure how I was going to contextualise, but I was going to ask it at some point. From the outside looking in, I wonder if you have too many MMORPGs, because you seem to have quite a lot there. But I wonder if that's you're sort of your audience better than me, so you would say a lot of those games have subtle differences, or maybe you just really love MMORPGs and you think at the moment we've got 3 or 4, so that's not too many. We haven't got 100, but those are quite big games, and I wonder how many if you're playing those sort of games, you play one, you don't sort of play 3 at a time, so they're sort of a bit competitive with each other, maybe.
I think it's fair. I think first it was like, oh, do we have too many pixel games? And then now it's like, so why do pixel games make sense, right? It's like, well, because the art isn't very super involved to create, you can be a little bit faster and more iterative, right? Our next thesis does center around MMOs, where the games that we grew up playing that would have been a good fit for Web3 technology, oftentimes are MMOs. Old school RuneScape, EVE Online, World of Warcraft, and Diablo to an extent. These are games that we know would have benefited, at least in some ways, in a clear way, from Web3, because they have very deep and complex economies. And that's related to our MMO thesis, where we're starting to get 4 years from the last big funding cycle, where some of these games have had enough time in the oven to start to get interesting. So that's one of the things that we have a bit of a bullish bet on is minimum viable MMOs. So you also see there some of them are more pixel related. Illumiterra, Forgotten Universe, kind of more pixel related, right? Or pixel art, so still able to iterate. Lumiterra also, while it's 3D, you have that kind of Paper Mario 2D quality to the characters, and so yeah, we think that it's time to start exploring MMOs, and if we don't do it, maybe nobody else will. And after having played Lumiterra, Forgotten Universe, I have some amount of bullishness on the economies, right? Where Lumitera, although it was only up for a couple of weeks, put up big numbers, and I can, as a player, as having gone through that experience, I totally understand why, right? The economy was almost like, I think one of the themes that we'll see is that these Web3 MMO economies might be even more brutal than Web2 MMO economies, where you almost have like extreme scarcity. So then me is like, okay, I wanted to do the end game content, the PvP, stuff like that. And I'm not gonna grind for hundreds of hours to get that gear. So I just bought things off the marketplace. Then I was nice. I was able to participate in the end game content and have a lot of fun. Almost be like a guild leader in a way as well, right? So I think a lot of the next generation of Web3 experimentation when it comes to the economics is going to be, right, what does a Web3 MMO economy look like, right? What are the things that we can learn from Web2 and things like EVE Online, right? I've learned a lot from Hilmar, him just critiquing and telling us things that they learned while building EVE and how it relates to Axie and what we're building. And then there will be lessons like that, and then there will be probably certain things that are unique to Web3 MMOs. I think one thing is like, it's going to maybe feel a little bit brutal because you need to make sure if a lot of these things are on chain, that the supply is very well thought out.
Yeah. No, it seems sort of clear that there are going to be at some point in the future. I guess the worst problem with blockchain gaming, you never know if it's 10 years or next year. Is some of those games that require very big sort of integrated economies are obviously made for a thing where people own stuff and can trade stuff. I mean that's sort of like blockchain gaming design 101, I guess. But it's as you say, it's because these things have value from day one. It's sort of how you get the stuff in balance, sort of from day one, because you can't go into something like that off balance because it'll just get sort of botted to death or whatever the things. So we talk about MMORPGs. Interestingly, lots of other people have piled into trading card games, and you don't seem to have any. I mean, maybe I've missed some. I don't know. But do you think there's some genres that you just haven't sort of come across good examples that you want to put in, or do you think you have to have sort of one of everything, or how do you go on that sort of, I guess, slate might be a term for?
Well, we have enough, right? When we have a lot of TCGs when it came to Axie.
Yeah.
And we feel like we've done, quite a lot of exploration there. And I think our bullishness, right, is more right around things like pixels, which is like more of a kind of like RPG, MMORPG type of economy. I think that's also I think if there were the right TCGs to come across our desk, or so to say, we would onboard them. But it's very hard. It's very hard to make something like that. It's going to be hard to make something that's better than Axie. And the Axie TCGs, both Classic and Origins, because those have been in iteration for a very long time. Parallel is something that is interesting, and they seem to be, having some fair amount of success, and maybe attracting some of the Hearthstone players. I like it because it's controversial, right? They seem to be having some kind of a war with the Hearthstone community. So. Something else, I think there will be more successful Web3 TCGs. But I think that it's like on Ronin, right? It's like you have to compete against Web2 TCGs, and then on Ronin you almost have to compete with Axie. And I think the Axie TCGs are actually pretty good.
I guess there's another thing, sort of again from the outside looking in. It's interesting with Ronin that because you have Axie as a sort of the cornerstone for what that community is. You sort of know. You have a good idea, at least, of what some of that community is really going to like, because that's sort of what they've grown up on. But then for others, you're not quite sure how much you can sort of, do they just want more of that sort of stuff, or how are they just gamers who are going to want anything? Obviously, the other interesting thing from someone in the West is, the Ronin community, I imagine, is pretty skewed sort of Southeast Asian. That's my external view looking in. Obviously, a Vietnamese developer, but I guess you've got good chunks of people globally as well. So, do you think it's right that we think of the sort of the Ronin community as a more sort of Southeast Asian skewed community, or is that again slightly wrong thinking?
I would say that Ronin has distinguished itself as the consumer crypto chain for both Southeast Asia and LATAM.
Okay.
But we are a global, pretty diverse movement. We do have a fair amount of Americans and Europeans and Westerners, and they do provide a very pivotal role in the network, right? Oftentimes being community leaders, content creators,
Okay.
Ronin validators, right? A lot of those are coming out of the West.
Okay.
And East Asia, I would say as well, or more so than the emerging markets.
Okay.
So I think when it comes to the vast majority of the day-to-day players, right, the people who are grinding and playing the games, a lot of those are from emerging economies. But when we think about this as a blockchain network, there are a broad variety of archetypes of people, and a lot of the developers, a lot of the influencers, a lot of the kind of the whales and the collectors, a lot of them are coming from places that aren't necessarily typically
Yeah.
associated with Ronin, but it's a little bit right, like more like those are the OGs in a lot of cases, right? Where a lot of our original uh, players, right, came out of the West back when it used to be a very small, passionate community, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and sort of maybe setting our gaze wider than just sort of Sky Mavis. Talking about sort of the general blockchain sort of sphere. I mean, I think 2024 has been pretty good so far for you guys. As we've sort of gone through, you've had a lot of sort of announcements about games. A lot of the some of the games you've had sort of live have done pretty well. Been Pixel's the most popular game in terms of on-chain activity pretty much every day for the entire year. Obviously that's great for you, but would you like to see sort of stronger competition, if you put it that way, from other platforms? Obviously, there's loads of blockchains out there. There's thousands or hundreds of games out there as well on other blockchains. I guess a lot of that activity has been a little bit less mature than you because people are launching on new L2s or L3s, or lots of people are sort of having to make the choices about blockchains that you guys made maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But it does sort of strike me as if I was thinking at the start of this year to where we are now. It's great that there's all these sort of Ronin games that have peaked at 100,000 sort of wallets and stuff, but there's very few other games that have got that far. Which maybe you guys are just geniuses and everyone else is just average, or I don't know. I wouldn't say it necessarily worries me, but I find it like a slight oddity that there's you guys who are sort of standing out there.
I think the thing that you're getting at, right, to be honest, is yes, we're dominating within Web3 gaming, but Web3 gaming as a whole isn't as large as it could be if we were all pulling our weight, right?
Yeah.
And theoretically, from Ronin's perspective, right, it's like we shouldn't be trying to maximize for market share. We should be trying to maximize, right, for owning a good chunk of a very large industry. Right now, the pie is relatively small.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do see some interesting experiments that are happening. And things like Maple Story Universe, maybe Avalanche, right? Maybe got to give them a shout out for having some interesting shots on goal. Where they have Maple Story right off the grid seems to be attracting some interest. It's very, very, very hard, right, to pull off something like that beyond the initial kind of hype cycle. But I'll be watching to see if they can actually onboard people on chain, whereas right now it looks like kind of like a nice Web2 game, very expensive to create Web2 game that is being seen as a Web3 game, but then we'll still have to see how it comes to the Web3 integration and whether how they're actually onboarding people. So yeah, I think that I think that the rest of the space is learning and getting better. But I think when it comes to Web3 gaming, right, the thing that we're kind of competing against is meme coins in a way, right? For a lot of the kind of the capital and interest from the rest of the space. But yeah, we won that battle before, so it's not an impossible thing, right? Where I remember last cycle, right, meme coins, Dogecoin, SHIB were very much in vogue for the first half of 2021. But then that kind of started to peak out after Elon Musk went on Saturday Night Live, I believe on May 11th or so of 2021, and then right the second half of that year was totally right driven by Axie and NFTs on Ethereum. So yeah, I think that while meme coins have attracted a lot of market share, it's still quite early in the cycle, and I do think that we'll see substantive crypto products also leading mind share when it comes to to the broader overall Web3 space. The cycle I think is still potentially very very early in the cycle. We tend to think maybe it's been we're deep into it because Bitcoin started its rally earlier ahead of schedule this time. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's an interesting comparison with meme coins. I think I've seen other people sort of make that comparison. And I guess what's interesting is earlier in the year when it comes to token prices of stuff, which is clearly not everything, is there were sort of what I would have called gaming meme coins. Maybe that's not the correct sort of definition of them because they had roadmaps and they thought they were doing something else. But it seemed very meme-like, and I guess that took a lot of people's interest because you could sort of obviously the point about meme coins is everyone piles in and they go up and people, if they get out at the right time, make money, but then that's not very good for the long term. And I guess what having you would know more than anyone is actually making a game that can engage people for long periods of time is extremely hard compared to launching a meme coin. So, and I guess I think within blockchain games we're seeing more and more that's the tension between obviously there's some bad actors who just want to make money. There's some inexperienced people who want to make a game but can't, and then there's very few teams who are sort of know how to make a good game and are rigorous enough not to just sort of rug people and struggle through the many years of work they need to do to get to that stage. And I think sort of my frustration is I'm not patient enough for those teams to sort of come through, and it always seems like it's next year, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally relate to why that would be frustrating. I think it's very hard. There's a lot of people who have expertise in making games. They don't have the ability to have this burn the ships mentality where if they start to struggle, they almost run out of money, they're gonna go back to doing what they know as a sure check or a sure bet, which is making traditional games. So yeah, I think we're in this quite unique position where we have some our expertise is really centered around making Web3 games, and we have a lot of experience doing it, 6 years of experience, so I think we have an interesting skill set, which is hard to expect or project onto others. It's something that we can share with the games that we're working with on the Ronin network as well, but it's also it's complex. But yeah, I think that we will see. I try not to concern myself, or I don't need to concern myself with what's happening in Web3 gaming kind of outside of Ronin, other than hey, that's an interesting experiment. Maybe we could learn from it in some way as well. Right?
Do you think games are big enough to drive a cycle themselves, or are games very much as they have been in the past, sort of subservient to the wider crypto cycle?
I would argue that crypto is still a seasonal industry, where it kind of seems like once every 4 years, we have some positive optimism, that basically drags everything up, and within that, gaming, at least in 2018, it didn't really, aside maybe from CryptoKitties, have too much of an effect. But 2021, I would argue that the most passionate and the craziest part of the cycle in 2021 was being driven by Axie and a lot of Web3 games. Can eventually all of crypto and all of Web3 basically escape broader macro conditions? I think eventually yes, but it will take some time, and it will take a lot of I think innovation when it comes to token value accrual and sustainability as well, where basically can you have product market fit that then is tied to increased demand for the token, and where there's continued demand for the token without as much reliance on incentives, and I think that just comes to network maturation. And so if you think about Uber, and it's they had to spend a lot on incentives for a very, very, very long time until they were able to shift to basically becoming sustainable via Uber Eats, rather than actually delivery. So I always think about Uber, a lot of my teammates who tend to do well is they're hardcore gamers and love Axie or Ronin, at night, but during the day they worked at Uber. And I find that they're actually able to think quite well about how it comes when it comes to like incentives and spending and eventually making that transition. So.
Mm-hmm. You did mention something. I'll go back to something you said actually very early on. Was you talk about I guess the Axie treasury was now increasing? I mean, do you feel? I mean, obviously that sort of stuff is hit by, I guess, sort of in its own sort of cycles or things going on in the game. But do you feel like you're getting a better grip on that, having that positive? Because I guess you are still giving away quite a lot of AXS tokens for every sort of these era that you're sort of doing in encouraging people to play, and obviously that must have some downward pressure because some people are going to sell it. But do you feel that you're making progress in the sense that you have enough value you're getting people to understand there's value within the product that's better, that's more valuable than sort of selling the tokens they're getting?
Yeah, I believe so. So for example, one stat that I got recently was that, so we have this bounty board system, which is kind of like a questing system where we give out tokens for doing tasks of varying complexity within the Axie universe. And 70% of the tokens that we give out from that every week are either held or staked.
Okay.
Right, so it's like only 30% of it is being sold, right? So that's when we think about like computing the cost. One way that I think about it is, right, rather than just like, hey, we're giving out this amount of incentives and we're making this amount in revenue, I think more about the sell pressure that is actually being realized as the true cost, and the other, right, well, that actually, right there, if there's holding it or staking it, that also like increases their loyalty, and it gets rid of supply overhang, right? So that's how I think about. I'm starting to think about like computing the cost of these incentives, is you're actually paying in sell pressure rather than paying in the full price tag, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, so, I mean that's a quite surprising stat. I would have said more than 50% was being sold. So if it's only 30%, then that's good. Okay, so it's probably time to wrap up. We've mentioned sort of a few of the products coming out. I don't know whether you want to sort of choose between your babies, but in terms of stuff that you've looked at, you've mentioned a few games that you've been playing. If you want to give people some homework, can you mention sort of a couple of games that you're really excited about on Ronin that you think people should be checking out?
Well, let's what am I playing right now? I'm playing Ragnarok Monster World.
Yeah.
So I just hit over 100,000 downloads.
Okay, cool.
That's public information because you can literally just check that on the Google Play Store. So that's over 100K. And that's obviously from the iconic Ragnarok Online IP, which is a Korean IP that's quite popular in Thailand and the Philippines, right? So I think we're starting to say, people were like, yesterday my friends were asking me, what about like big Web2 game developers? What if they come in and eat your lunch? Well, I think the ones that are going to be more open are going to be maybe the Chinese and the Koreans, because they're like more fast and iterative and experimental. Especially in Korea, a lot of the population already owns crypto. A lot of these gaming execs already own crypto and understand it relatively well, at least from like an asset ownership perspective. And so yeah, I think we've set a precedent that, hey, like a lot of those Web2 gaming companies that come into the space, if they're in Korea and China, I think they'll want to at least have a conversation with us. So I think that was an interesting thing that we started to see. So Ragnarok Monster World, it's actually a good game. I'm a Battle Royale player for 9 years. I think it's a reasonable twist on that genre. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. I think I'm in the top 1,000. So I recommend everyone to check that out, and it should be on app stores. If it's not available in your region, just go to ragmon.gg and you should be able to download the Android APK. But it should be available in a lot of geos on the Google Play and the Apple App Store.
Yep.
So there's that. I'm excited about Lumiterra. I think the next test for that should be coming up this autumn. Forgotten Runeverse. I had a lot of fun with that. And that likewise, I think should have its next launch maybe in November, something like that. If everything goes according to plan, I believe like November might be a good time to start looking out for stuff from them. So yeah, I think those are the ones that come.
No, that's good. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. No, I've played. I've been started playing Ragnarok, and as you say, it's very very polished.
Nice.
Very polished experience.
I
can't say I'm in the top 1,000, but
my wife is also playing, so that was also a positive sign. Is like
Yes.
my wife played Axie Classic for a bit, but since then, Ragmon is the first one that really caught her eye. She loved that she was able to just go download it from the App Store in Korea, so that's been a fun thing to watch her go through.
Cool. Good. So there's your homework. Ragnarok, Lumiterra, and Forgotten Runiverse are the ones.
Ragmon is also Ragmon. Depending on when you're watching this video, or maybe the P2A should have started, where they're giving out Zenny, which is like going to be their token.
Okay.
To people who are climbing and on the leaderboard and things like that. So.
Yeah. Good. As long as you don't sell it off, as long as you hold it and stake it forever. Thank you so much, Jeff, for your time once again.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, always a pleasure, and wow, I didn't know that it's already been a year and a half. It feels like we do this, every so often. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Cool, good. And thanks to you for watching, listening, however you're consuming the podcast. Remember, every week we are talking to people who are building out this whole new way of building games, building community, building value, all that sort of good stuff. So do subscribe, don't miss out, and see you next time.